In biology, ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is known as the universal energy currency, and kind of like how money functions in an economy, ATP stores energy in the bonds between its three phosphate groups, especially the third one, which is high in energy due to strong repulsion between negative charges. When a cell needs energy, it breaks that third phosphate bond in the process called hydrolysis. This converts ATP into ADP, and a free phosphate releasing energy the cell can use the right way, just like spending money to get something done. To recharge, the cell uses energy from food, like glucose, to reattach the phosphate group to ADP. Turning it back into ATP, this ATP-ADP cycle is constantly happening, like the flow of money being earned, spent, and re-earned in an economy. So ATP acts like a rechargeable battery, always ready to release energy when needed and constantly renewed. In a similar way, a strong currency keeps the economic activity flowing by providing fast, reliable, and recyclable value. In biology, the ATP cycle is how cells constantly supply themselves with energy. When a cell needs energy, it breaks down the bond between the second and third phosphate group in ATP. This releases energy and turns ATP into ADP and a phosphate. Now, thinking of it like spending money, to get something done, ATP is the currency and breaking that bond is the payment. Then using energy from food through processes like cellular respiration, the cell reattaches the phosphate to ADP, turning it back into ATP, like earning money again. This cycle of spending and recharging happens continuously, keeping energy flowing through the body, just like how money needs to keep moving in an economy to keep things functioning. The ATP-ADP cycle is essential for sustaining life because it provides a constant, reliable flow of energy, just like how a functional economy relies on a stable currency system. ATP acts as the cell's energy currency, working as a medium of exchange for all cellular transactions, like muscle movement, protein synthesis, and transportation. But ATP doesn't last long. It's quickly spent and must be constantly regenerated. That's where the cycle comes in. ATP is broken down into ADP, releasing energy, then recharged using energy from food. This continuous cycle ensures that each cell always has energy on demand, similar to how money must circulate efficiently in an economy to keep activity going. Without it, it's just like any other economy. Without liquidity, the system would collapse and life would stop.
ATP is produced and used locally within each cell, without needing a central authority, kind of like how a decentralized economy might function. Each cell generates its own ATP using energy from nutrients through processes like cellular respiration or photosynthesis in plants. Once produced, that ATP is spent immediately by the same cell to power its specific needs, like a local business earning and spending its own money. There's no central bank distributing ATP. Instead, every cell manages its own energy production and consumption based on real-time demand. This decentralization makes the system incredibly efficient and responsive, just like in an economy where individuals or regions manage their own currency flows to match their needs. Moreover, because ATP cannot be stored in large amounts, cells must continually produce it, ensuring a dynamic and adaptive energy supply. This self-sufficiency enables organisms to efficiently regulate their energy needs without external interference, further highlighting its decentralized nature. ATP is produced.
Each cell independently manages its own cycle according to its immediate energy needs, which allows the ATP-ADP cycle to function without a central regulator. When a cell utilizes ATP for energy, it breaks down the adenosine triphosphate, also known as ADP, which then releases the energy required to power cellular activities. The cell then rapidly converts ADP back into ATP using energy derived from nutrients. Each cell engages in this ongoing recycling locally, free from centralized authority. Similar to a local business restocking its inventory in response to consumer demand rather than having to wait for approval. Since the ATP-ADP cycle is entirely self-regulated, each cell can rapidly adapt to its specific energy requirements.
ATP is an efficient and self-sustaining energy currency because, like money in an economy, It can be quickly earned, spent, and regenerated. Cells generate ATP through processes like cellular respiration, comparable to how a country earns revenue. ATP is then spent to power cellular work, similar to how money funds goods and services. Its regeneration from ADP is rapid and ongoing, making it a decentralized and stable system, much like a well-managed financial cycle. This constant flow ensures energy is always available where needed, echoing the liquidity and utility of money in economic systems. Additionally, ATP transactions within cells occur with high specificity, ensuring minimal energy waste, similar to an optimized financial system where transactions happen efficiently without unnecessary losses. This precise and immediate availability of ATP guarantees that biological systems remain functional and sustainable, just as a well-structured economy remains stable despite continuous exchanges.
What are the key features of ATP that make it an efficient and decentralized energy currency? ATP is about the exchange of energy, powering the body and muscle contractions from muscle contractions to cellular repair of the brain. By focusing on the energy used in tasks, skill sets, experience, and market forces, we become more aware of the actual exertion in terms of energy and resources of what is necessary for a task to be performed. ATP is an efficient energy currency as it holds innate value in resources and energy. It is also easily exchanged in biological systems as a primary source of energy, and as a primary source of energy, it is used by a majority of living organisms. This allows it to be as sorry, by giving it innate value, it allows it to be used immediately and effectively. ATP currencies are backed by physical assets as they are tangible resources that can be used, thus making it a decentralized energy currency. Since it does not rely on government authority and uses the value of resources like gold and oil, it becomes decentralized and that can be used in trade on a global scale. What are the main limitations to modern fiat currencies in comparison to ATP? The main limitations of modern fiat currencies is that they are a monetary asset which can be printed to an infinite scale, leaving it volatile and prone to the risk of inflation and the possibility of devaluation. Since fiat currency is based on government funding, it is solely based on the trust made with the government, making it vulnerable to political instability, poor governance, and poor economic policy. In comparison to ATP currencies, ATP is connected to the real-world application of resources and energy, making it backed by finite physical assets. This makes it a more stable currency as it is less volatile to inflation. Since physical assets are used, i.e. gold and oil, the currency has intrinsic value, which makes it less vulnerable to government control.
How could a decentralized, energy-based currency system function in a human economy? A decentralized, energy-based currency system would link economic value directly to measurable energy outputs. In this model, every work contribution is quantified using standardized units, such as joules or kilowatts, so that the value of a task reflects the energy expended to complete it. Tasks that yield high productivity with low energy inputs become particularly prized, creating an incentive for efficiency in both human and machine labor. This method would likely leverage decentralized technologies such as blockchain to record and validate energy contributions transparently without relying on central authorities. Additionally, incorporating diverse energy sources from human effort to renewable energies could enable a dynamic market where innovation and sustainable practices are rewarded. By grounding currency in tangible energy metrics, this system redefines economic value, making it less arbitrary and more closely aligned with actual work outputs and the efficiencies of modern production. What challenges and risks would arise in transitioning from fiat money to an ATP-like energy currency? Transitioning from fiat money to an ATP-like energy currency presents substantial challenges and risks. The main hurdle lies in redefining economic value. Fiat currencies rely on centralized trusts and governmental policies, whereas an energy-based model depends on objective and measurable energy outputs. This shift could trigger volatile inflation or deflation if energy production scales unpredictably or suffers disruptions. Social risks include the potential marginalization of individuals with lower energy output, increasing existing inequalities. Technology, creating globally accepted standards for measuring and verifying energy contributions will be essential, and the required infrastructure may become a target for cyber attacks or geopolitical conflicts. Furthermore, established financial systems and institutions would face ongoing disruption and repurposing. What challenges?
The term gold standard describes a monetary system where a nation's currency is directly correlated with gold. ATP and gold do not have the similarity of having a decentralized system. Under the gold standard, central banks and governments control gold reserves and money supply, centralizing monetary authority. This centralization allowed them to influence economic conditions by adjusting currency circulation based on gold reserves. Therefore, the gold standard is centralized because governments and central banks control currency supply based on gold reserves. In contrast, ATP systems are decentralized. These systems are interdependently managed with no external factors. Each cell independently manages the ATP system, in contrast to gold, which is governed by a central authority. Each cell produces, uses, and recycles its own ATP to meet energy needs without relying on others. Therefore, ATP serves as a decentralized energy currency with local energy distribution. Meanwhile, the gold standard is a centralized system controlled by governments and central banks.
What were the limitations of the gold standard compared to ATP's efficiency? Some of this involved inflexibility. ATP is produced and used instantly, ensuring a continuous energy supply. However, the gold standard restricted money supply, making economies slow to respond to crises, leading to recessions and deflation. In addition, unequal distribution. ATP is universally present in all living cells, while gold reserves were unevenly distributed, favoring wealthier nations and creating financial instability in others. Another issue is storage and transfer. ATP is stored and converted efficiently within cells, whereas gold has to be physically stored and transported, making transactions costly and inefficient. In addition, external shocks. ATP regenerates continuously, but gold discoveries or shortages led to unpredictable economic booms and busts, disrupting stability within the economy. And finally, centralization. ATP functions in a decentralized way within organisms, whereas the gold standard relied on central banks, making economies vulnerable to mismanagement and policy failures. ATP's efficiency highlights the gold standard's flaws, inspiring better monetary systems. Thank you.